like the Nazis in the bright lights. Oh yeah. Freeze your house.
Well, I wonder why that one. I wonder why that one goes. Here. Just where it like, what's his name from Little Rascals off to the side? Scotty. He turned his hat and remember it always came off the side. Isn't that what she said? They couldn't see your eyes or something?
Is that what I have to do?
I don't know.
Take this off?
Well, it's Mrs. Bushman. When we get started, they're not going to yell. Again,
I guess we're on. We're getting a thumbs up.
Oh crap!
I haven't heard the bell.
Okay, no, I have to turn that off. Well, good morning. Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started with our interview of Paul Brunsman. So, Paul, what made you decide to interview people at Lake James?
I was told to. Isn't that how you normally get volunteered for things? Or
usually it's when you don't show up at the meeting. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah, I think that's the way it is. So today we have Tom here that I'm going to be interviewing. And so we'll take a few minutes. Maybe some of you don't know who he is. I really appreciate people like that. But so Tom, I know you've gone on some mission trips in your lifetime. What would you say is what brought you to desire to do mission work?
Well, it's kind of a journey, but the journey starts here at Lake James when you're coming here every year for the School of Missions and you got a missions-oriented family. Growing up, as you recall, whenever missionaries came through at our church, Mom and Dad would always have them over for a meal. And so we were introduced to missions at an early age. When I was in medical school, during my electives in my fourth year of medical school, I had the opportunity to go to Mashoko and work with Dr. Grubb. So Sandy and I spent a month at Mashoko. That was our first medical mission trip. And then life kind of comes along. I have residency, and there's no opportunity to do anything elective in residency. And then you start a practice, and you're trying to build a practice. You've got kids, little ones. And medical missions and short-term missions really wasn't on the forefront of my goals. And then again, back here at Lake James, we bring in the family every year, and I had an encounter with Jerry Schweitzer. And Jerry had a mission work that he did, not that dissimilar from what Kevin Dooley has been talking about all week, as Jerry was trying to establish connections with many business and professionals in the former communist bloc nations that had just recently opened up. And Jerry was from a church in Kentucky where I had a good friend from college who was also a pre-med student, and he was now a family doctor. And I asked him if he knew Dr. Jones. He said, "Oh yeah, I go to church with Dr. Jones." He says, "I've been trying to get him to come to Romania with me." And I said, "Well, you tell him that if he goes, I'll go." Now, you got to be careful what you say, especially to a missionary and especially to a minister. And this was a retired minister who's now a missionary. So it wasn't, but maybe 2 months later, I get an email from him that said, "Hey, we're scheduled to go next April." This was in 2001. So in 2002, I did a trip to Romania, and that started a whole yearly trip to Romania through Jerry's Mission Connect. And we did medical. We had no idea. I'd never really done a short-term mission trip. Jerry had never done a short-term mission trip. So this series of trips were very educational for us. And it didn't take long, as many of you who've done short-term missions or long-term mission, but particularly short-term missions for many of us, it really becomes a very spiritually rewarding thing for us. As much as we're trying to, do work for the Lord in another country, the Lord's working on us at the same time. And so that had an impact. And then that was about 10 years that we did that every year. And then that was no longer available. And there was a couple of years where I wasn't doing these annual trips, and I kind of missed it. And I was in my personal devotions reading in Matthew and came upon the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, ask God whatever you want, ask, seek, knock. And then he says, which one of you whose child asks for bread that you would give him a stone? And if you're able to give a good gift and you're evil, how much better a good gift God wants to give you. And, a lot of times when I try to understand my relationship with God, I look at my relationship with my children, and I got to thinking, when I go to my kids on their birthday's coming up, I ask them, what do you want for your birthday? I don't expect them to say, well, I want you to pay the water bill. I want you to make sure the mortgage is paid. These are the normal things that as fathers we do. That's not what I want to hear from them. I want to do something special. And I got to thinking, this is God asking me what's in my heart. And I got to thinking, I practice in North America. I've been to Africa. I've been to Europe. Wouldn't it be kind of cool to practice medicine on all 5 continents? Now, I know y'all say, wait a minute, there's 7 continents. Well, Antarctica, that's too cold. Don't worry about that. And Australia is just a glorified island. And the Olympics have 5 rings for the 5 continents. So I figured that's okay. I said, so that's kind of, and so I took this to our prayer group on Wednesday night at church, and this whole concept. And of course you got people that, what is your desire of your heart? Look at it from that standpoint. And so, some people say, world peace. Well, everybody wants world peace. Sandra Bullock wants world peace. Everybody wants world peace. And so, but then someone else says, I'd like to write a worship song. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what God's asking for. And somebody else says, I want to write a children's book. And I think that's what we need to go to God with, those desires in our heart. He's a loving father, just like I am. I don't, I'm going to give my kids, food on the table, but when it's their birthday, I want to give them something special. And we have a loving father who wants to do that for us. So Chelsea goes on these CIY trips to Cambodia. And I'm thinking, Cambodia, that's Asia, right? So she kept saying, Dad, Mom, you guys need to go on one of these trips. So we signed up for a CIY trip. And so we go on the CIY trip. All the trips that Chelsea went on, they flew out of Los Angeles, went through Seoul, Korea, and then down to Cambodia. Well, so we get the itinerary, and here we are flying out of San Francisco, and we're flying through Hong Kong. And I'm kind of thinking, Hong Kong, hey, I wonder if we can stop and see Debbie. I haven't seen Debbie. We don't get to Hong Kong to see Debbie. She's way over there. And it turned out that we land at 6 in the morning, and we don't leave till 4 in the afternoon. And so we were able to arrange to have lunch with Debbie. And so I'm telling Debbie this kind of testimony, how I kind of prayed to God, hey, God, can I practice medicine on 5 continents? And I said, I just felt that this was kind of a way of God telling me, I'm giving you the desire of your heart. In fact, I'm going to add this special side trip, that you can see your sister on the way. And Debbie says, well, Tom, it's even more interesting than that. She says, if you'd have come impactful again from a spiritual growth standpoint. Some of the most amazing, spiritually enlightening moments in my life occurred on these trips. Okay, now you fast forward a little further. Jerry's got this ministry in Colombia, and he keeps telling me, Tom, I'd love to have you come down and do a medical trip. Now, I'm the kind of guy that I'll go on a medical trip. Tell me, you put me in the clinic and I'll take care of the patients. But when it comes to organizing a trip, that's not me. So finally, Jerry calls and says, hey, Tom, I've scheduled a meeting with Bill Warren, with FAME. And so we met with Bill, and Bill essentially said, FAME can help you in whatever level you would like, even to the point where we can just organize the trip. And of course, we said, hey, can you organize the trip? And so they've been organizing trips to Colombia, and that's now where I've been going. So now we've got all 5 continents. And I still look at that as just a loving father given one of his children the desire of his heart. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I've been.
Okay. So I guess what goes in my mind now, and I just noticed you do the same thing except for with a different hand. When you talk, it moves around. But which continent do you like the best? Is Jerry here? Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of elements to that. I mean, there's always the food element of that, and I'll just put that aside. But it is nice to land and be ready to go, having South America so close. I know that last trip we took to Cambodia, we entered the airport in Siem Reap, and by the time we left the airport in Dayton, Ohio, was 45 hours later. And that's a long, long trip. And generally, we don't have that going down to Colombia. We can leave and be there and still be fresh. There's not a significant time change. So I'll just give that element to the answer. Yes, we really like going to Colombia.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. Yeah, the organization, Jerry's taking credit for those conveniences, that the organization makes sure that we don't have a time change when we go down there. Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate that.
Well, I guess not to, let me back up here a little bit and just try and word the question this way. What are some of the struggles that you found in different on the different continents or in the different places you've gone? Are there things that are different, that as far as this would only happen in Colombia as opposed to, or this happens everywhere we go? You see what I'm asking? If not, just answer whatever you want.
I'm going to answer whatever I want, but the problem is that these are issues that always are, repetitive here. There's just the bathroom issues, but particularly the fact that you can't, it really is hard when you can't even let the water run in your mouth when you shower, and cold showers and that sort of thing. I'm sorry. I'm kind of a baby in regard to these things. I kind of like the better comforts of life, warm showers and being able to let the water touch my mouth. But those are one of the things, but really probably the most difficult for me is the language. I've been blessed with being monolingual. And so I have a lot of difficulty with the language, but they've always provided very good interpreters at the various places.
Okay. And did you ever find, especially with medical, do you have to get special interpreters, or are they able to take doctor talk into people talk? Or do you just give it in people talk and then they go?
I've had it a number of ways there, and those times when we have good interpreters that are medically oriented, they are certainly the best. But the language is the key. We had some very good some of the best interpreters in Romania were young people that didn't have a medical background, but they were very good at the English language. And so that's the key. But having a medical background does help.
And I'm going to guess, like with patients, if you've got to give a shot, ouch is the same in every language, or do they speak that different?
That's not true. I think ouch is much louder in the United States than it is in many of these countries around the world. And, one of the things in Africa, the people there, many of them were very stoic. I mean, you often didn't hear ouch. So it doesn't speak the same. I think it's much louder in the United States.
So we're babies here in the United States when it comes to that.
Did I say that?
I'm trying to understand it. Apparently, I'm not understanding very well.
Well, I think, yes. We like our comforts. I've already alluded to that.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some great things that have happened to you in mission-wise on these trips?
What do you mean mission-wise?
As in, I mean, you're dealing with medical. Are you dealing strictly with medical, or are there also opportunities to present the gospel, or can you do that while you're treating patients?
Yeah, we do that. Once I get into a clinic situation, I'm usually more focused clinically. And again, the language barrier makes it much more difficult, but there are opportunities that I'm able to present the gospel even in the clinic. But most of these clinics are set up and have been in the various places that I've been where there are ministers, there are people pastoring and praying with people. And for instance, our CIY clinics always had a prayer station that people would go through on the way out, and they would often experience something on the way in. So that wasn't really my purpose from a team approach in those clinics. Again, as you asked that question, the spiritual aspect from my standpoint, every time I go on one of these trips, there's always something that opens up my eyes to my relationship with God. And I find I have pastor friends here that have sabbaticals. They'll take sabbatical time. They'll be off for 3 months, 6 months. And I've decided that these trips are my sabbatical. They aren't just a vacation. These are opportunities for me to be a better doctor, a better clinician here. I can put aside all of the junk that our health system has put in front of me, and I can put that aside as I go to Columbia and just be a little bit more pure in my focus on the patient, even with all those barriers that are there. So to me, it's my sabbatical that I come back more refreshed. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that it does.
Okay.
Unless you would like to elaborate any more on that. Apparently no, at least not yet. So when you do go to the different countries too, are there, well, I guess let me back up here. There's cultural differences in each of the places that you've gone. Are there any that are easier for you to adjust to or harder for you to adjust to?
And boy, that's one of those questions I really want to give thought to. I don't know that I've ever seen it, because again, I've already talked about some of my difficult cultural adjustments in language. The food, I don't find that so much an adjustment. I do have to be careful. And we were always careful, particularly in Cambodia. Our hostess always knew what was okay for us to eat and what was not okay, and she was very accurate. We're very careful in Colombia of what we eat. South America is the one continent that I have multiple occasions developed what clinically we call traveler's diarrhea, what some people call Montezuma's revenge. I always make sure I have medication for me there, but I have to be very careful. I love adventure eating. I taught my children adventure eating. And so that's part of the cultural experience. But it's important to not be too adventurous and knowing what you're adventuring into and being prepared, because as much as you come close to the precipice, you don't want to go over it. You still want to have a parachute with you. So Cipro is my parachute.
So if you were going to be adventurous like Andrew Zimmern, you'd like to have a team that goes ahead of you in order to let you know what to expect with this.
I would like to. We don't necessarily have that. I know he's got a lot behind the scenes on his show. I imagine I still trust those that do go ahead and prepare and that's the sort of thing that I tried to avoid when we were initially looking at these trips to Colombia. I knew I could not do that sort of organization, and we really have, Jerry and Roger there in Colombia, very good at preparing us and preparing the team. And FAME does a great job of preparing. Of course, they got so much experience putting together medical teams. And in fact, ours was the first that FAME took. They had never done a medical trip to Colombia. Now they're doing, and that's right before COVID was the first one, and then now they're doing 2 a year. There's a lot of opportunity down there.
And to me, when I picture like Colombia, although the cuisine may be a little bit different, when I picture something like Cambodia, I'm thinking lizards, monkey brains, and that stuff that you eat.
Before you think of lizards and monkey brains and that sort of thing, and they're there, you first have to think rice, because there's rice, and then there's rice, and then there's rice. And then you might get some crickets or tarantulas, which I've had both of those. But, rice is breakfast, rice for lunch, rice for supper, rice. That's Cambodia.
Okay.
And, and I don't do that. I like rice, but it just slows me down. And I still remember that one day I decided I'm not eating rice. And the next day I had the best day in Cambodia, because I just didn't, I slept better the night before. There's just a little too much rice in Cambodia for me.
So in Cambodia, you get rice for every meal.
Yes.
But is it something special like then monkey brains on Sunday?
Generally not. I try to avoid that. But we do find ourselves out in the remote area. We did have tarantula served to us, and you got to try it. I do believe that you have to try everything. How was it that Mary Schweitzer used to say, where he leads me, I will follow. What he feeds me, I will swallow. She used to say that.
I got to say, I'm really curious. Is it like the whole spider, so you get the
whole spider, but I just
everything?
Yes, but I just ate a little piece of the leg. I wasn't eating the gushy stuff in the middle.
Well, how do you know if that wasn't the best part of it?
Well, I didn't need to know.
In some places, that's people's pets, tarantulas.
Yeah, okay. There's so many things that go. When you see me pause, a lot of times it's not because I have nothing to say. It's because I have so many things to say. Do I need to say them? And I'm going to hold off on that. But I do have kids here in this country. I'll see kids before school. They come in for their school physicals in August, and I'll ask them about, if they eat healthy, to try to understand if they understand what healthy is. But I always love to use that as a lead into some of the pictures of things that I have eaten. And that's one of my favorite pictures to bring up to the kids here is me eating a tarantula. And of course, then their brothers and sisters come later the next week and they want to see the picture, that sort of thing. It's very interesting. I think there's a lot of protein there.
And probably a lot of other good things. But I think I would rather try the tarantula than cockroaches personally. But were you ever served cockroaches?
No. And that's fine. I can do without that.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Jerry.
I may even look over towards Jerry as I try to. Normally, a clinic I might see in a typical personally, and we'll have multiple providers in the clinic, so it's hard for me to keep track of the total number. And I actually journal, and that's one of my. Whenever I have somebody in my office that's going off on a short-term medical trip, I always tell them, and I'll tell you all, if you're going on a short-term trip, always journal. Because when you ask me some of the impact that has on me, I can go back into my journals and read and remember some of the impactful things. Something happens, and then I'm reading in the scripture the next day or that very day and how it relates to the troubles or the difficulties I'm faced with. So that is one of the things that I'll remember. Now I can't remember what the question was. How many people I see. So I'll sometimes put in my journal the number of people I see. And if I see 50 to 60 people personally in a clinic, that's pretty busy. Now, when we were in Romania, and I say we because we had a team and we had more than one doctor, and this was this doctor friend of mine. We've been friends since college. And one year we went, and we always kept the team together, and we get there, and our host who organizes on the Romanian end, he says, oh, this year we're splitting the team. Well, that really kind of stirred us a little bit. I've never been out on my own in a village, and so Dave's going one village, I'm going the other, but it became a contest. We'd come back and ask, well, how many did you see, and how many did you see? And even today in my office, I will always remember that one day, and I think it was in Dorova, was a village in Romania. I saw 104 patients that day. Now that's a lot, and you know, and we had it set up in a way where I could do that. And I loved it. You know, when people are looking at their schedule in my office here today, well, gosh, I saw 25 people today. That's a lot. And I said, well, I remember that day I saw 104. I shut them up.
You don't tell them you didn't have to do all the charts and stuff.
No, I didn't have, no, that was, yes.
I can say that in the last trip, in a 3-day period, you all saw 469 people.
So in a 3-day period, on our last trip, we saw 469 people.
As I recall, you were the only doctor, there were 3 residents.
Yeah, well, the last trip I was the only doctor, but we had experienced nurses or nurse practitioners that were able to see quite a few people. And then we will often team up with medical professionals in Colombia, which is key, very important, high priority for us to work not in opposition to the medical system, but in conjunction with the medical systems there in the country and in Colombia. Yes, and Jerry wants to make...
Because of that collaborative attitude, they, the doctors and nurses who come down from America, the medical school has attached itself to our mission, and now their residents and interns and the nursing school also, they're sending students in every week to look at our kids.
So because of our collaboration, we now have the local medical school and nursing school that send their students, when we're there with medical trips in Colombia, they will actually send their students to work with us.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to guess that they may not be Christians then that are coming to work with you, these students.
They're probably different level of Christian, since there's a lot of, Colombia has a lot of Catholic influence, I believe. But I don't know, they're not all Christian. Yeah, it's not their requirement.
So there's another outreach opportunity, at least as I see it.
You find when you go to different countries that the government places any restrictions on you, or are you pretty free to practice?
That's a good question, and Karen's asking how restricted we are in countries, or are we pretty free? And that's actually a fluid answer too, because I think we were very free when we first went to Romania. And I think one of the reasons why we don't go to Romania is as they become more and more aligned with the European Union, there's more and more restrictions on what you can do. Not only that, but we're trying to do more of community health, even with FAME and with the trips to Colombia. But I know that for me to go down there, being a doctor, people are going to come to me with their complaints, regardless of what our focus is. They're always going to have that, and I'm always going to want to meet that. But we have to be very careful that we do that within the context of the regulations in the country. And many countries are open to that. Many countries are becoming more and more wanting you to be licensed if you're going to be distributing medications and that sort of thing. So that's why it becomes a very fluid answer. It could be open today and not open tomorrow. And so we have to be aware of what changes are going on in that context. Bill.
Have you had cases on your mission trips that are unique or different or things that you would never see in the U.S.?
I have, gosh, there's probably a lot of them. And I've been doing medical trips now for over 20 years, so it's the ones more recently that I remember because I'm not as, my mind is. But I can remember in Cambodia, these kids come in with these marks on their back. And I think they do this in the United States too. But it was just this weird, not really a rash, but these, and they were nice and straight and parallel marks on both sides of their back. And they evidently had this idea that they would rub with coins when they were sick. And I took a picture of it. I'd never seen it before until one of the other providers there told me what they were doing at home, or I don't know if it was the local shaman or whatever. Where we work in Colombia, we are in a city. We don't go out into the countryside. So they do have access to care, and they probably don't, I don't know that they have as much of some of that traditional medicine that you might get more in the outskirts or out in the countryside. But even though it's there in the country or in the city, they don't necessarily have access to it, whether it be a transportation. And so one of the things that FAME is doing in Colombia is we're setting up with La Costa Colombia, we're setting up a community health center in the neighborhood of Barranquilla where we're working. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted on your question. We see interesting things. I see interesting things all the time. I can remember a child in Romania, in this small village of Romania, that had hydrocephalus that we just don't see in this country anymore because we recognize it at an early age, and they get the shunts so that their fluid doesn't build up. And I took a picture of this child. It's very sad, a huge head that could have easily been prevented. Another child coming in Cambodia with jaundice, one that I remember. I mean, just yellow eyes from some sort of I don't know if there was something in the water, some sort of chemical that they had taken that affected their liver. It's just, there's all sorts there's so many of them. It's hard for me to answer that question in regard to medical. But there are cases that are common that still impact me. And the one that does the most, the one that I remember the most, and I've taken pictures of cases, but there was one day in Cambodia, and it was a beautiful day, and we were going to this remote village in Cambodia. And it's like a 2-hour drive, and we're getting off the highway, and now we're on these dirt roads, and it's this bus full of 20-plus Americans. We're not light. We're quite heavy. I still remember coming onto this wooden bridge. The bus driver had a choice. He could drive through the creek or go over the bridge, and I was sure he would have to go over the creek. And he went straight to that bridge. And I still believe to this day, God kept his hand on that bridge. We came back the same road and went into the creek. I took a picture of that bridge. I got it on my phone. And there's no question, God held us up there. So we get to the clinic, and we set up. It's an outdoor clinic. It's a bright, sunny day. And about halfway through the morning, this guy comes in, and he's got a speck in his eye. Now, he heard that this American team was coming. Now, I can tell you, if you've ever had a speck in your eye, you want to get it out. It hurts. It doesn't matter how big it is. He waited like 3 days because the American medical team was coming. And so he comes in to see me to get this speck out of the eye. Well, I don't have my eye tray. And normally, to see these specks, you got to have special glasses to see. It's so tiny. And so it shut the clinic down because there were 3 of us providers. The other doctor and nurse practitioner, we all put our heads together to try to get this guy's speck out of his eye. And without going into too much detail, and finally, and normally I guess I am going into detail. Normally, you take a needle, a hypodermic needle, and you kind of bring it under. You gently bring it tangentially underneath the speck and lift it off. And I tried to do that. And of course, we did not successfully numb his eyes. And so he flinched. So I just handed it to the other provider. And she is here in the States an OBGYN, but she does general medicine when she's on trips. Cheryl was her name. And so I just handed it to Cheryl. She's a little younger than me. She has better eyes. And she got that thing right off, and we patched it up, and we sent him on his way. And afterwards, Cheryl confided with me. She says, there's a reason I'm OBGYN. She says, I hate the eye. She says, and then she tells me, and she confided this in me. I don't know how public this is, but I'm going to go ahead and share it with y'all. She says, the first day we did eye anatomy when I was in medical school, she had a panic attack, and they had to bring the head of the psych department to calm her down. I had no idea. I just handed her the needle, and she, without flinching, she got that thing off. So we're leaving this village. It's about a kilometer down the road, and we look up, and we're driving down this road, and here up on the hill is this dilapidated shack, and here's this guy standing there with his patch on his eye and his family, and they're waving to us. And fortunately, one of the nurses got a picture of that, and so that is, even though I got pictures of patients, that's the one picture that I framed and put in my office.
So do you have, if you're going back to these same countries multiple times, do you see the same people? I mean, have you ever had a repeat customer, if you will?
Yeah, again, I don't recognize the repeats as much in Colombia yet, perhaps. I do remember a village in Romania that we went back to several times, and there were some people that were considering me their doctor, because that was the only doctor they saw. This one village, Ohabalunga, I remember when the first time we were heading out there, Daniel said, this village is so remote, even the communists left them alone. And that impressed me. And so we would go there, and I remember this one young girl, I saw her grow up. She came to see me every year.
Okay. Yes.
So I don't know what area of medicine you practice. If you ever found yourself doing surgeries or procedures that you'd never normally do?
Well, I did that here in the United States, but
And I won't come back to you.
I'm gonna elaborate on that because when you leave, I'm a family doctor, so I got training in all areas, and so you get out into practice, and you're a little more cavalier in your younger age, maybe because you're fresh and you know a lot, probably more so because it's what you don't know that you're so cavalier, and as you get older, you're less cavalier, and that probably does. That does translate into the mission trips. Probably your answer would have been most when I was in Africa. That's where I found myself doing things more than I would never do here. I mean, it was only like the first day I was there, Dr. Grubbs had me deliver twins. And that I've never done before or since. I would assist him on surgeries. I'm sorry, I'm going to start reminiscing here. And, it's a hot climate, and we'd wear shorts, and we'd have these gowns. And I think Sandy took a picture of us operating, and the gowns go below our shorts, so it looks like we don't have anything on underneath these gowns. I remember him coming in. I'm sorry, I'm elaborating again. Stories, you guys get tired. No, you're here because you never get tired of the stories, do you? And I remember this kid came in, and Dr. Grubbs he had put a plate in. He had fractured his ankle. He had put a plate in. He said, we need to take the plate out. He says, but I can't remember if it was a Phillips or a regular head. And he had me go to his regular toolbox and get one of each and put it in the solution to cleanse it a couple hours before the surgery. And I know your follow-up question. I don't remember if it was Phillips or regular head. But we had both, and we used the appropriate one.
That's why you have to be prepared.
Yeah. Those are the sort of things that maybe I learned more from a mentor like Dr. Grubbs, that sort of just being relaxed. I mean, I would have probably normally been stressed. I can't remember, was it Phillips or regular head? It's like, well, I don't know, just go ahead and do them both. And if you know Dr. Grubbs, he had that laid back, And that may have been the biggest lesson I learned from him on my first trip, is just that relaxed nature he had, no matter what happened.
Okay, well, I've heard the bell. Tom, I want to thank you for joining us up here. And thank everybody for showing up. We'll be dismissed until we can get set up for the next hour.
Yes?
What?
I got a text from Robin just a few minutes ago. The funeral for Christian will be Thursday, August 3rd at 11 at the Martinsville Church of Christ. And that's there on Main Street in Martinsville, Ohio. So if anybody's wanting that address, I've got that. Jerry's got it. But again, it's Thursday the 3rd at 11 in Martinsville at the Church of Christ there.
Okay, thank you. Could we get like those address cards or something printed up and put there, or is it not worry about it right now? Okay.